All right, let's be honest. Have you ever watched your phone light up, felt that tiny spike in your chest, let it ring out, and then immediately picked it up and typed, "Hey, what's up?" Not, "Sorry I missed your call," not even a full sentence, just enough to respond without actually answering. If that's you, you're not alone. And more importantly, you're not weird. What you're experiencing isn't antisocial behavior. It's not rudeness. It's not even avoidance in the way people usually mean it. It's something much more precise. It's your brain choosing a different mode of communication, one that aligns better with how you process the world. So let's slow this down and really look at what happens in that moment. Your phone rings, and before you even consciously think about it, your body reacts. A slight tension, a shift in attention, a disruption. For some people, that ringing feels neutral, maybe even pleasant. But for a lot of people, it feels like pressure, like something just entered your space uninvited and said, "Drop everything, respond, now." That's not a conversation, that's a demand. A phone call is one of the last forms of communication that still assumes immediate access to you. It doesn't ask, "Are you available?" It assumes you are. And if you're not, it creates a subtle social friction, because now you have to decide, do I interrupt what I'm doing, or do I ignore it and deal with the social consequences later? That decision, tiny as it seems, happens dozens of times a week, and over time, your brain starts to associate the ringtone not with connection, but with interruption. Now, here's where it gets interesting. Most people assume the preference for texting is about convenience, but psychologically, it goes deeper than that. It connects to something called cognitive reflection, which is just a formal way of saying some people don't like to speak before they've had time to think. On a phone call, there is no buffer, no pause, no revision, no second draft. You are thinking and speaking at the same time. And for some brains, that's inefficient. Not because they're slow, but because they're precise. They don't want to just respond, they want to respond well. They want to choose the right words, the accurate tone, the exact meaning. And that requires space. Texting provides that space. When you text, you're not just communicating, you're editing. You can pause, reread, adjust, delete. You can turn a half-formed thought into something clear and intentional. So what looks like avoiding a call is often actually this: choosing clarity over immediacy. But thinking is only one piece of it. The second piece is energy, because not all communication costs the same. A phone call is cognitively expensive. Think about everything your brain is doing at once during a call. You're processing the words, you're analyzing tone, you're interpreting emotion, you're predicting where the conversation is going, and you're preparing your response in real time. And you're doing all of this without pause. That's not one task, that's multitasking at a very high level. For people with high social sensitivity, meaning their nervous system picks up more subtle cues, this load is even heavier. They notice more, which means they process more, which means they use more energy. So when they hang up after a 20-minute call and feel drained, it's not because the conversation was bad. It's because their brain just ran a full-speed simulation of another person's mind while managing their own. That's exhausting. Texting, on the other hand, breaks that load into pieces. You receive information, you process it, you respond when ready. No overlap, no rush, no performance pressure. And that word performance is important because at its core, a phone call is a performance. You are expected to be engaged, responsive, emotionally present, socially smooth, in real time. Texting removes that stage. It turns a performance into a process. And for many people, that feels safer. Not because they're afraid of people, but because they value accuracy over speed. Now let's talk about something even deeper: control. We live in a world that constantly pushes urgency. Messages, notifications, alerts, calls. Everything is designed to feel like it needs your attention immediately. A ringing phone is the loudest version of that pressure. It doesn't wait quietly, it insists. So when you choose not to answer, something subtle but powerful happens. You interrupt the pattern. Instead of reacting automatically, you pause. And in that pause, you reclaim control. The sequence looks like this: The phone rings, pressure appears. You notice the pressure but don't obey it. You choose when and how to respond. You re-enter the interaction on your terms. That's not avoidance, that's regulation. And over time, that habit shapes something bigger. It shifts you from external validation to internal validation. External validation says, I need to respond immediately so people see me as available, responsive, good. Internal validation says, I respond when I can give a clear, intentional version of myself. Texting tends to favor the second. It allows you to show up as you choose, not as you're forced to. Now, let's address something honestly. Can this preference go too far? Yes. If texting becomes a way to avoid difficult conversations entirely, if it replaces connection instead of supporting it, then it stops being a tool and starts becoming a barrier. Some conversations need voice. Some moments need presence. Some things can't be edited into existence. But that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about the everyday choice, the small, repeated decision to protect your mental space. Because here's the real shift in perspective. When you choose to text instead of call, you are not giving people less of you. You are giving them a more considered version of you. A version that has thought before speaking. A version that isn't rushed. A version that isn't shaped by pressure. And that leads to the final idea. Peace over performance. Every interaction asks something from you. Time, energy, attention. And if you're not careful, you can spend your entire day reacting, answering, responding, performing, without ever choosing. Texting, when used intentionally, is a way to slow that down, to insert space between stimulus and response, to protect a small pocket of quiet in a very loud system. So the next time your phone rings and you let it go to voicemail, don't immediately label that as avoidance. Ask a better question. Am I protecting my energy or am I avoiding discomfort? Because those are not the same thing. And if the answer is that you're protecting your energy, then there's no guilt required, only awareness. Because every time you choose silence over noise, every time you choose intention over reaction, you are creating space. And that space, small as it seems, is where clarity lives. So here's the question to sit with. If you stopped reacting instantly, if you gave yourself permission to pause more often, what would change about the way you communicate? And more importantly, what would change about the way you think?